Welcome to the Femsplainers. I'm Danielle Crittenden.
And I'm Christina Hoff-Summers.
And, well, we're starting off. This is like our kickoff to the holidays episode. They've lit the tree in Rockefeller Center. Melania's unveiled her scary red trees.
Those trees are odd. It's a strange choice.
The whole thing is odd. I mean, the rest of the rooms look traditional. The theme was what? American treasures.
Yes.
But then maybe these cranberry trees looked okay.
In person?
In person. And then there's like a do-it-yourself. If you want to make your own scary red tree, like I think you can go to the White House website.
Well, someone put Handmaid's Tales,
The best meme was the Handmaid's Tale. I also like the two kids from The Shining.
Something. Well, never mind.
Yeah. Well, I think that's oddly appropriate for this year, this White House. Well,
one's going a little too far.
But one of the things that, of course, is going to happen these holidays in the next few weeks is people are going to be drinking more than usual. For us, like I don't know that we can drink more than usual, but I think people are going to be drinking more than usual. And there's new guidelines from the United States Preventative Service Task Force. I don't know what that is.
This sounds dubious, but we'll see.
Well, they are telling that doctors during your annual visit, you should also include a drinking checkup.
I usually lie on those.
I think everybody lies.
They say, how much do you drink? And I don't know, once in a while.
They're like, how many drinks would you say you have a day? And what do you answer to that?
One or two, most two.
And then
that's not really. And even that, I had a doctor who said, that could be 14 a week. That's dangerous. And so I found another doctor, a French doctor.
What kind of red wine are you drinking?
A bottle a day is fine. And one for lunch, one for dinner.
Yes, and champagne is excellent for your spirits.
It's good for your spirits and your health.
Well, according to this Preventative Service Task Force, the suggested limit for men 21 to 64 is no more than 4 drinks in a day, but 14 for the whole week. So it's suggesting on one day you could have 4 drinks and then you have to pause. But anyway, you can't exceed 14. For women, we can consume up to 3 drinks a day, but only 7 drinks over the course of the week. I think this is discrimination. Don't you? That there's this gap about what women should be, the number of, why is our drink limit less?
Well, it's hard to know what to make of this. There's so many studies that have told us such and such substance is dangerous, and then they change their mind. For years, we weren't supposed to eat eggs. Egg yolks, especially dangerous. And I remember meeting a young doctor in New York who had published a paper saying it was false, and he was considered a crank, just a dangerous outlier. And he's turned out to be right. And now we can have it again. And apparently the best part of the egg for you is in the yolk. This was this whole fear over cholesterol and in fact, but then we discovered I think it's still true. There's good and bad cholesterol and fatty things you should be having and other types of fats you shouldn't be having. Right. Like you should have whole milk and not, 1%. Oh, really?
Yeah. That's another good fat. You should have whole yogurt and not.
I like cream.
Well, cream is good too. But anyway, so they say that the World Health Organization reports that alcohol consumption is responsible for 1 in 20 deaths globally each year. It doesn't seem so.
Yeah. If I'd like to be in the 19.
All right, and then I have some more alcohol statistics coming up. Apparently for women, the percentage of women who binge drink or who associate alcohol with a holiday, they associate with New Year's Eve.
What is binge drinking?
That's when you have more than your 3 drinks a day. I don't know.
Just,
you drink until
you arrive at a party. You have a glass of wine and then another, you have a dinner. There's another, you could have 5 drinks. But as long as you have it with food, I thought it was okay. And water.
Well, I think binge drinking is that you drink so much that you black out.
I've never done that.
You've never woken up and not remembered?
Never. How would I know? I've occasionally been overserved in a but not very often that I have a hangover.
Well, apparently women most associate alcohol with New Year's Eve, and that is the day that they're most in danger of binge drinking, but not the winter holidays. Men, apparently, it's for St. Patrick's Day. My last fun booze fact for you, Christina, is that people in cold places drink more. So it's not just genetics. It's where you live will guide your alcohol consumption. And there's good reason for that. There's a scientific reason for this.
It warms you up.
Yeah, it's called alcohol is a vasodilator, meaning it increases the flow of warm blood to the skin. So booze quite literally makes you feel warmer. And being, as you know, Canadian, that I think explains a lot about me. And even U10 Canadians drink more when it's warm, too. So
I'm from California, and margaritas are good on a hot day.
Yeah, maybe there's an opposite effect, that booze in certain climates can also cool you down. Also now a shout out to our Jewish listeners, because Hanukkah has come very, very early this year. Tonight will be the third night of Hanukkah. This is the part of Hanukkah where I just start losing interest in candle lighting. Like the first one, you're so revved up, and then it sort of wanes until the last night where you get the whole fire show. But, one of the things over the years, Jews always feel really sad around these times in terms of, Hanukkah can't compete with Christmas. We can't really decorate for it if you have a Hanukkah bush / tree.
This may be a converts problem.
No, I think it's a. No, converts, I think we feel less weird about it. Although a friend of mine who once married a woman who converted to Judaism, and then he had grown up with a Christmas tree, decorated with Stars of David. And after he married her and she converted, he said she converted to the Ayatollah of Judaism and banned anything that was like that. But when Hanukkah's early, like it is this year, it feels, I like it when it coincides with Christmas, but I have now decided to always decorate lavishly for Hanukkah. We have an modern Orthodox rabbi, and
Rabbi Hertzfeld, whom I love.
Rabbi Hertzfeld. And one year, the kids were still fairly small, and we had gone on we'd celebrate Hanukkah, like with a lot of, lots of gifts and latkes and things, but we didn't really decorate for it. And certainly we didn't have lights. And one year my son looked at me, he must have been 8 or 9, and he said, "Mom, this is a festival of light, so why can't we have lights?" And I thought about this, and I thought, why can't we have lights? And I went to my rabbi, and I said, "Can we have lights?" And he said, Of course you can have lights." And then I went, that was it. I was unleashed.
White lights everywhere.
Blue and white lights?
Blue and white.
I was unleashed. I made a Hanukkah wreath. I actually fashioned cedar into a Star of David and lit it. And look, cedars are in Israel.
Christmassy, but it's okay.
No, but hey, cedar, they all grow in Israel. And now my rabbi and I compete to have the most, I want to say tastefully, but I think we would agree garishly decorated house for Hanukkah. And he competes with his Christian neighbors to have the most lit up house. And he has those inflatable dreidels and those inflatable menorahs.
Doesn't he have a Hanukkah mobile? He goes around.
He does.
By the way, I have one joke. What's the difference between a Unitarian and a Reformed Jew?
What?
The Reformed Jew has a Christmas tree. All right, sorry.
Anyway, so happy Hanukkah to our Jewish listeners.
Yes.
And we're going to now, we don't have a guest this week because we have so many backed up stories that you had wanted to discuss.
Yes.
So I think we're going to do that next. And then we're also going to catch up on listener reaction, which we have not been able to get to.
Yes.
So we'll get to our stories after the break.
Danielle, did you receive your latest delivery from Scentbird?
I did. I got my latest cologne. The brand is Toka, and the scent is Maya. And I'd only known Toka as a makers of candles. Beautiful candles and room scents, but I didn't realize they had perfume. So I got that this month, and it was absolutely great, but it was hard to choose because there are over 450 designer brands.
It's a good problem to have.
which perfume to choose this month. And what I like about it, too, nothing worse than walking through the perfume department and being assaulted.
And an often very imperious salesperson.
Right.
They monitor you, and if you want to try on too many, you seem not to like it.
Right. I think they come at you like those crop sprayers. That's the thing. I'm terrified I'm going to come out smelling like the perfume department. But in any case, if you can't decide which perfume you want, there's an editor-selected cologne of the month. There's also colognes for men. And they come in those beautiful things we keep in our purse, these sleek sort of travel containers.
Perfect for travel.
I found that if I don't love that scent that month, at least I've gotten to try it. And then I'll do something like I'll spray it on my pillows or my linen.
Yeah, it's perfect.
You'll spray it on your dog.
Izzy needs it. She runs away when I try. And I think I have to train her better.
Well, we can't recommend it for dogs. But in any case, you will love it. We highly recommend it. And if you want to try it out, go to scentberg.com. That's scent, S-C-E-N-T, bird.com. And use the code FEMSPLAIN for 50% off.
Only $7.50 for your first month. Free shipping. Scentbird.com/FEMSPLAIN. And use my code FEMSPLAIN for 50% off your first month.
Date a cologne before you have to commit to it forever.
Applesauce versus sour cream. Applesauce or sour cream. It's the choice you're gonna have to make. Which to put on your potato cakes.
Welcome back to the Femsplainers. And one of the first things I want to talk about is this Jeffrey Epstein case. Have you been reading about it?
Yes, I have.
I mean, I'd heard about it before, but the Miami Herald, if they don't win a Pulitzer Prize for this piece, they went back, because this was about a decade ago.
Right.
He was found guilty of trafficking young girls to his Palm Beach mansion.
Sort of ages 14 to 16,
The
maybe
younger
as young
the
as
better,
13.
Yeah. And he wanted, and he would have them, he had this method where he would sort of dazzle them with his wealth and money and then pay them to give him a massage. And if they didn't want to go further, he'd say, well, I'll still pay you if you can bring me another girl who will do it. And he was just insatiable. He maybe 3 times, and he had women working with him. And the thing is, the police began to know about it. A mother finally came forward with a complaint, and they saw teenagers coming and going in taxis, and they knew about it.
I assume he has lots of help who also helped usher the girls up the stairs to his
there
bedroom.
was a lot, just as in the Weinstein case, there were these enablers, men and women around him. And, this is a guy with 2 jets and mansions and so forth.
And most, maybe importantly, not just some random wealthy guy, highly connected to both celebrities and political figures, like from Bill Clinton to Prince Andrew.
Yes.
And I think that's what is fascinating. Donald Trump. One of his early victims, who I believe is part of this suit now that they're bringing, they've been able to revive this, and we can talk about what happened that buried it and why it's just coming out now. But she worked as like an attendant in the spa or the gym at Mar-a-Lago, and was seduced away from that to go and give a massage.
Yeah. And what's most, well, there are many, many disturbing things. I don't know what is most disturbing, but this is certainly upsetting, that there was substantial evidence that, corroborating the massive abuse on the part of Epstein. And so, but the U.S. attorney in Miami, Alexander Acosta, who is now this labor secretary.
Right. Oh, in charge, by the way, one of overseeing human trafficking is one of his jobs.
Well, he signed off on this sort of sweetheart deal, this
It was secret
deal. Nothing was in the press.
Right.
It was just where he wouldn't spend any significant time in prison. I think he had some kind of he was technically in prison, but he had leave.
Well, what they did
12
is
hours
he sealed.
a day.
He sealed without the victims knowing. The prosecutor sat down with Epstein's lawyer, made a deal without, and then
no sex offender would ever get.
That
sex
no
offenders
sex-
don't
exactly.
get work leave or their days.
Right.
He got it all.
on much lesser charges. They swept most of the victims almost quite literally under the rug. And it's only now that these victims, and I think it's probably, and this is, you and I, we talk about Me Too a lot here, and we talk about a lot of the excesses. I mean, I think we're all working out what does it mean, what is good, but this is one of the incidences where it's interesting this story is coming out now. And
well, I think it's interesting that people who may have, I don't know, I can't imagine how you could have looked at it with anything but contempt even, 10 years ago. I don't know that, but apparently people were willing to forgive him or, sort of think.
Well, I think they could just get away with it. And
he treated these girls were the most vulnerable. They were,
Right.
A lot of them were homeless or
Right.
damaged young women, psychologically damaged, and he preyed on their vulnerabilities and their neediness. And some of them thought he was their boyfriend and that he loved them.
Well, one of the things I think what is going to make this story bigger, aside from this obvious and now proven cover-up, and the fact that, Alexander Acosta is, labor secretary, is that the fact I want to see, why did they cover it up? Like, it's not just because he's a rich white guy that he got away with it. He was connected to so many powerful people. And we don't know. We know that Bill Clinton habitually took rides on his jet. He was always offering his jet to, his friends. But we don't know to what extent that maybe they had nothing to do with these underage girls, but maybe there were also parties.
I think more is going to come out.
And that's the thing.
And we'll see.
That's right.
But as you said, this is what Me Too is all about, is that
Right.
things that were tolerated are no longer tolerated. And I like to think the police would not act the same way today. I like to think that even going back to Dominique Strauss-Kahn case, remember when he...
Oh yeah.
that we have...
That future, president of France,
who was in line to be president of
in
France,
the Sofitel in New York
Yes.
and trying to get it on with the maid.
I like to think that these cases would be viewed differently now, and that we just have no tolerance for sexual violence and predation, and particularly of young people. But some of it reminded me of the scandal of child abuse in the Catholic Church, where there was just
Right.
Kind of a network and a cover-up, and it
was a very powerful cover-up. And that's a great analogy, because you've got this network of very powerful men, and I have to think that the haste and the desire of both the prosecutor and Epstein's lawyer to close it up very quickly was because of how many other very prominent people could be implicated. So Miami Herald Miami Herald, if you're listening, keep going.
Yes.
And
I'm just so impressed with the Miami Herald with this.
Yeah, phenomenal
great
reporting.
On the other hand, there are some disturbing Me Too eruptions. For example,
these aren't Me Too. This is what do you want to call political correctness?
Let's give it another name, because
we need to come up with something that's not Me Too. Like, Me Too should be positive, and then we can have
Me Too is the reckoning for
the reckoning,
the intolerance for abuse and predation. But,
or the tolerance.
Like we talked last time, I think, about the lingerie comment in the elevator.
Right.
And now, this guy's...
The professor who had his whole career ruined because
his
he made
career's
a
not
joke
ruined,
in
but he
an
could be
elevator.
thrown out of his organization. He's been
Right.
humiliated, and it's a ridiculous situation. Now, things like Nolan Bushnell, who is the co-founder of Atari and just a giant in the video game industry. And he was going to be awarded... I don't know, lifetime achievement or something like that. So there was some Twitter gossip and saying, he used to hold board meetings in a hot tub and women had to go in. And, he had a T-shirt that said, I like to F. And, all this turned out, he did hold meetings in hot tub. It was in the 70s.
Was this in California?
Yeah, and everybody did it. And he was a tremendously positive guy and helped women's careers. And, and so all these women from Atari from those days have come forward and said, this is absurd. He's the nicest guy in the world. He was completely fair and not a harasser. And they're defending him, but no award. He had to apologize. And this kind of ritual,
Right. There was no suggestion. I mean, I was in California and LA in the 80s, early 80s, and people actually did hold meetings in hot tubs, and it wasn't weird. I guess it's California. It wasn't the oddest thing to do. People socialized, they had wine, but there wasn't, it wasn't necessarily sordid. I mean,
it was fun.
It was corporately inappropriate.
We had a little more fun. We could have
corporately inappropriate. I will allow that, but it's not to say there was immediate. Okay, we can't defend. Okay, I won't defend meetings in hot tubs, but
I will.
Okay, but anyway, it sounds like this guy has nothing else against him.
Nothing. Quite the contrary. He has an admirable record of hiring women and being friends and helping. And I mean, he's been shamed because of gossip, groundless, baseless attacks, but these are taken seriously. Now, another example is the film critic David Edelstein. He's often on
New York Magazine.
Fresh Air and New York Magazine. And this is a guy with an encyclopedic knowledge of film. I mean,
well, he had one blank spot in the...
No, well, what he did on his private Facebook, he made an ill...
I can read it. Do you want me to read it?
Read his little comment.
Yeah, I got it. It says, okay, so NPR has already asked him. So after the death of director Bernardo Bertolucci, he posted on his private Facebook an image from the most infamous sex scene in the director's Last Tango in Paris with the
caption. Does everybody remember that scene in the apartment?
Actress Maria Schneider was with Marlon Brando. Was she? I haven't watched. Was she covered in butter?
Well, not covered in butter. Butter was used as
butter was used.
And that was an improvisation. She didn't expect it.
Well, apparently, he wrote on his Facebook, even grief is better with butter.
Right.
And that, I'm not a film critic, but even I was vaguely aware that since then, the actress who had been very, very young at the time, I don't know how old, but
I think she was in her 20s.
But she, yes, as you say, it was very improvised. And afterwards, it was unscripted. And she felt...
Well, she knew it was going to be a sex scene, but not with butter.
But she felt that it was rape.
No, well, she said it was sort of rapey. Or she said something like it was kind of like... She didn't say she was raped. She just felt that
But she felt
creepy.
Exploited and used, and she was totally unprepared for what happened. And then that came out, but then... Edelstein apologized, and he deleted the post, and he said, I didn't remember the scene as rape, and I didn't know the real-life story about Maria Schneider.
Which is possible.
It's a little hard to believe. But the point is the punishment...
I saw the movie recently, but
I
bet a couple of years ago. You know what shocked me most?
What?
It was back... When did that movie come out? 72? Yeah, 72. It is that there was no waxing then.
That was the hairy decade. Everybody was so hairy.
What a bush.
Well, everybody was hairy. Men had not only long hair, but beards. I mean, we think of those images of John Lennon and Yoko Ono.
Oh, my goodness.
I mean, she was so hairy. Like, everybody was hairy.
But this was hairy. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But, should he lose his job? Because it was... tasteless and thoughtless.
As more and more of these cases come out where men are not called out like the Jeffrey Epsteins of the world, but men who are making stupid jokes, men who maybe did something that was not even regarded as anything at the time that they did it. And we're seeing this now with Stephen Elliott, who was on the Shitty Media Men list,
right.
It was called. That this was a private list circulated amongst journalists.
So-called private, but it was posted.
Well, it began private.
Right.
It began so-called private.
Semi-private.
Like, it was a Google sheet that was circulated amongst women in the media in Washington and New York about being aware of men who weren't rapists. I mean, they weren't Charlie Roses or Harvey Weinsteins, but just a warning, like, if you don't go out
Charlie
for
Rose wasn't a rapist. He was an exhibitionist.
Okay, but we're not talking at that level of weirdness. We're talking about men who would take you out for a drink and then get creepy.
Right.
Like, just don't go out for a drink with this guy. And this list got circulated. It got added to. And actually, one of our mutual acquaintances, Leon Wieseltier, was on it. And he got fired. He was about to launch a new magazine with Laureen Jobs. That ended.
Career annihilation.
Career annihilation for not criminal
nothing
activities,
close to a wine, nothing,
not discrimination.
It was on a continuum, and the problem is that there were men on there who were falsely accused. Some of them had been exonerated, but others, there was just guilt by association. They were lost jobs, career, no.
Right, Garrison Keillor was on that, and we've never heard the full story of Garrison Keillor. That he was not only was he fired from his
Prairie Home
Companion, but the archives were stripped. I mean, it was like Stalinist erasure of everything, and we still don't know what really happened. And these men, so Stephen Elliott was one of these guys. Stephen was founder and former editor of this publication called The Rumpus. And the charges against him on this list were creepy. He had written books about his own sexual, preferences.
He was sort of a I don't know, polyamorous or something.
Right, but he was very open
into bondage and discipline, but he liked to be the bonded one.
Right, but there was no suggestion that he had ever, like Louis C.K., sprung this on a woman, or that he had done anything. It was just, this was what he did, and he did it in his privacy, and he was on this list, and he lost his publication. And he is now, what's interesting, is suing the woman who started this list, Moira Donegan. And this is one of the first cases, maybe it is the first case against this, of this kind, where, because he felt, and I think correctly, that he had been punished for something that
he hadn't done.
And by the way, there were no accusers in this. There was no accuser. There was no crime. Let me ask you this. This is where I'm sort of sympathetic to this list. Not, the legality, whatever, put the legalities aside. It also raises incredible legalities that are going to come out in this trial. But Christina, what do you think? There are creepy guys, and there are quote unquote mentors, and there are editors, and there are bosses who are creepy, even if they never cross the line, or they may punish you subtly if you don't step up. And in the modern age, I guess this list was I think of it as the modern equivalent of a water cooler. What do you think? Like, how do we signal to each other? How do we signal to each other as women about potential male minefields, even if they're not rising to the level of...
Well, I mean, certainly there's nothing wrong with private emails, but this was semi-public because it was sort of circulating around the internet, and in a way that was many people could get access to it. So she wasn't sufficiently protective of the privacy of the people accused. And it goes back to the blacklists in the McCarthy era, and people having secret lists of those they suspected of being communists. And it has such a bad history because the potential for abuse is enormous.
Well, even more so now with technology, obviously.
Right. So I'm just thinking, we're at the early stages, but I think we're going to end up coming down on the side of protecting people from publicly, some false accusations. And that list, to me, it was frightening to see people accused of things by anonymous accusers, and with crimes as serious as gang rape.
Well, one of the interesting legal cases it raises is by creating that list and circulating it, sharing with another, not just another person, but especially with other people in the media, is that a form of libel? That in a way, in the era of social media, we are all publishers now. Mm-hmm. So what I share on my Facebook, I share a conspiratorial thing saying, Barack Obama is a Muslim axe murderer or whatever. are we going to become liable for those things that we share because we become publishers? And that's one of the cases that is being raised, or sorry, one of the aspects that's being raised in this case is, did those women who circulate it, even via email, private email, are they liable in the way that a publisher would be
I
liable?
hope not, because I think I circulated it.
Yeah, no, you never circulate. And neither did I.
Because not for the reasons of exposing the men, but just to my friends, I showed, look at this. This is so unfair. But
the most extreme case, and then we can move on to the next topic. But I'm not going to remember the name. But there was a guy who was fired for being just a shitty boyfriend. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That was recently. I'm just trying to remember what he was. He was editor of something. He was in media.
And some women published about his bad behavior, and he was
he ghosted them.
And he was fired.
He was fired for being a bad boyfriend.
Maybe we're returning to, maybe it's not a bad thing. We're going to return to the Victorian era, and we're going to have Mr. Darcy's, and then the Mr. What was he, Wentworth? Who was the bad guy?
Oh, Wickham.
Mr. Wickham's will be called out and humiliated, and you just have to behave honorably.
Well, yes, I think, though, the social media are far more effective policers of behavior than the ladies in their salons, tutting over things that I thought you were going to say that maybe everybody will just go off social media. Like, it'll be a rebellion against Big Brother.
In some European
we'll go back to flip phones.
I think in France, you can erase your name from social media.
What we're finding is you can never erase.
Yeah, the internet never forgets.
It never forgets. All right, next story. Christina, you've been anxious to get to.
Well, there is a new wage gap study that is fascinating to me because they looked at the earnings of men and women in the Boston in the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority, the MBTA, and this is a union, and the employees are paid according to hours worked and seniority, and there's, you don't get extra pay because someone likes you, or, it's just...
And are men and women evenly distributed across management or anything like that? Is it?
That I don't know, but what they found was that even though it was this unionized and people had similar tasks and hourly wages are identical, it's tenure that determines promotion. The women were earning only 89 cents on the male dollar. And
so they're women are what we're trying to say is women are the Canadian dollar to the American dollar.
Yes. And what they found was that women valued their flexibility more than the men did. The men were making more money because of overtime and working odd hours, and the women wanted more predictable time off. And there were changes made, and they didn't allow overtime to be calculated in quite the same way. And so the women and the men started to earn less, because it used to be that if you worked more than 8 hours a day, then you got overtime. And they said, no, it's got to be more than 40 hours a week. Anyway, it ended up lowering the men's salaries and disincentives to work overtime. And the women, they cut back on unpaid leave that was available. So it did close the gap a little bit, down to a few cents, but the women were very unhappy because they'd lost flexibility.
Right.
So I don't know where they're going to go from here, but what was interesting is people want flexibility, especially women. The gap had nothing to do with employer, that they were cheating women. It was that men and women wanted different things. And this is what we keep finding again and again. When you do all the proper controls, it's just that the relation to the workplace that men have and women is slightly different. And they found that even women without children were wanting more flexible time.
I thought, and honestly, the last time I looked at this was a long time ago, but you can correct me, that when you looked at wages, men and women, and it was apples to apples of the same education, the same experience, blah, 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 so long as they didn't have children.
Right.
Childless man, childless woman. Childless man, childless woman were the same or were in parity. There was no wage gap. And only after women had children did the wage gap emerge. And then you can say, well, that's sexism because obviously they're the ones taking the hit.
Right.
But you can also say that's preference. But is that still true? Is that right? Or
That's absolutely right. Although, as I said, in this study, even there was a little difference between the men and women. But overall, what they found is in this study is that the men who were fathers worked more, and the women worked less. And so it's really not, and over again, I find that's where most reasonable studies take us, is that it's not unscrupulous employers. And maybe we've wasted a lot of time, effort, and energy with activism against an injustice that doesn't exist. Now, that's not to say there isn't a problem. Mm-hmm. It is a problem that women earn less. So we need solutions. And one of the things this study says is that what women really need is more job flexibility and trade-offs where they could work many hours one day and then fewer another, but have control over it. So
do you think the millennials are solving that a bit? Like when you go to these crazy modern workspaces where they have like bicycles in the lobby, and that I know millennials will like want to take work off for yoga, but like, yeah, that's cool. You just go to yoga, but just, well,
a lot of them are having kids, so they're going to resent.
That's true.
Special. So what they might want is to have a lot of flexibility, and you can, it can be for childcare, it can be for your yoga class, for surfing.
But that's going to. But I think that's going to the technological changes. Plus, I think these more open-minded, flexible generation will start to solve that without you having, as you say, without trying to create it as something that's innately. The problem is because it's an innately sexual discrimination.
Yeah, well, but you have all these. This is like the showcase factoid, that women are being cheated out of whatever it is, 25%, 23% of their salaries, and it's just not an accurate characterization. What I'm trying to say is that these studies keep coming, and they tell me that we need new ways to think about the problem. And it's like the women's movement is stuck in this wage gap, war against women rhetoric, that's not solving the problem. If I thought it was advancing women, I'd think, okay, at least it's serving a good. I think it's holding women back because we're just not investing mental and, financial resources into new ideas.
Okay, can I share my one story?
Okay.
I'm afraid this goes back to the beginning of November, so it just shows how backed up we are on funny things we came across. This is maybe one of my favorite stories so far. Is a pensioner, 69, identifies as a 45-year-old, begins legal action to have his age reduced so he can attract more women on Tinder. Speaking of wage gaps, what about date gaps?
Date gaps. Well, I believe that I'm a member of the age fluid community, or the trans ageist. Would you like to change your age? Do you feel oppressed by it?
Well, I don't want to change my age. I think it's really more about what age do you identify as. So my late stepfather, I think he identified as an 8-year-old boy.
Yeah.
Into his 70s. Yeah. He was perennially an 8-year-old boy. Yeah. What is the age? What if you were like looking to yourself, what is the age you identify with?
Maybe 22.
Why 22?
Well, I know I just feel young. And I feel like I want to do anything, and then I realize I am so not 22. But my interior age is that of a very young person. And I still think...
You were kind of a hippie at 22, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I still identify as a 22-year-old hippie.
Yeah, and I still kind of want to be wild. And then I think, oh, no, you're an adult. You're a mother. You're a parent. You're a grandmother. And again, you can't be that wild. And so it's hard. It's not hard. I mean, I don't suffer, but I'm surprised. I'm surprised. And especially, I think of my aunt. You say aunts here. We say aunts in California. My aunts and grandmothers, and I remember with them when they were even younger than I am now, and they looked so old, these ancient women. And now I'm older than the ancient women.
You don't look older than the ancient women. No, but that was also an era where people they didn't do the same, aside from plastic surgery and things. They didn't dye their hair.
Tight
little
permanence, breaker, house dresses.
I think I identify, I would say, as like a 36-year-old.
I thought you're not that far from 36.
Oh, yeah. You're right. I'm just really dropping a couple of years. No, I think I identify as a 36-year-old because I think that's when I had the most energy. The kids weren't as tiny, so you've had your kids, but they're old enough, to sort of get their own lunch.
Yeah.
There's less pressure, and it's fun. Like your skin is still great. You still are very, very youthful, but you're just that little bit wiser. I mean, I found the 20s very scary, but being in one's 30s and things more settled. I think if I could go back, I would be 35, 36.
Yeah, but I think I'm even happy. We had Jonathan Rauch on the program.
Yes.
I think I get happier each decade.
Author of The Happiness Curve, that was season 1, Jonathan Rauch. Really the most inspirational book you can read as you get older, because he points out, and this is scientifically validated, that every decade people by and large get happier.
Yeah.
And that a person into the 70s and 80s, that a person in their 70s is happier than a 20-something, 30-something.
And in my 20s, late teens and 20s, I smoked all the time. I was always coughing. I didn't exercise. I didn't eat.
Yeah, I'm in better shape,
I'm in better shape
than I was.
So, I mean, I hike and climb mountains. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I would. If my brother was always hiking, and I would say, I'll stay in the car.
Yeah, I was like 20 pounds lighter, and I'd go up a flight of stairs and go.
I know. So we take better care of ourselves now.
And we're wiser. There are good things too, but skin is not one of them.
But do you think that he's serious, or is he just
this pensioner?
Troll? Is he trying to make fun of the transgender
Well, he's
movement?
apparently a 69-year-old positivity guru who's famous in the Netherlands. And he says doctors told him he has a 45-year-old's body and wants to be younger. And so he wants I guess as you would legally change your name, he wants to be legally...
And it's going to
for dating. For dating. But the point is, it's not like for age discrimination in the workplace. It's because he wants to date on Tinder.
Well, I think I read that he denies that. He says he's misquoted. So I don't know what to believe about his case, but...
Here's a picture of Christina. Do you think... Hang on.
How old is he?
He's 69. He says he's 45. He looks 69. Come on. He's a really good, youthful-looking 69.
You think he's good-looking?
No, I'm not saying good-looking, but he looks healthy.
He looks...
But he in no way looks 45. So, sorry. Okay, so let's take a quick break, and then let's get to our listener reaction, which is also backed up.
I'm ready.
You can't wait for your greasy treat now. Life has many decisions. It moves in all directions. This is just one huge, enormous, big decision. You have to make. You have to make
Welcome back to the Femsplainers. We are finally getting to listener reaction. I just want people to know that we read everything. We read every response on Twitter.
Yes.
We read all the emails you send in.
And we love to get them.
We love to get them. So if you want to reach out to us, you can reach us directly at contact@femsplainers.com by email. You can get us through Twitter at Femsplainers, on Facebook at Femsplainers, and on Instagram at Femsplainers Podcast. And we often put out questions and polls, so we hope you follow us. And we are...
Like us on the appropriate...
Yes, please like us.
iTunes.
Just like us. Just
and if you
really
don't
like us.
Never mind.
Anyway, okay, Zoe in the studio is going to read some of the reaction we've received over the past little while.
So, like you said, we have received an influx of listener feedback. So I'm going to go back, I think, 2 or 3 episodes to the episode that we had Alice Little, who works at the Bunny Ranch in Nevada, which she is the most successful sex worker in the United States.
And it's a legal brothel.
Yes, it is. So Sam reached out to us and said, as someone who in their 20s, I spent an embarrassing amount of time in strip clubs, the women I encountered weren't necessarily abuse survivor or drug addicts, though I'm sure some were, For the most part, they simply were women who didn't have a lot of career options, were a little more open-minded, some might say naive than average, and found being a stripper more exciting and lucrative than working at Walmart or being a waitress. But the one serious moral issue I've had with going to strip clubs is wondering to what extent I'm enabling women who are living a truly destructive lifestyle.
What do you think, Christina?
He sure went to a lot of them for a while before he
Maybe
became
we need to
guilty.
talk about that, Sam E.
Yeah. I'm conflicted. I would not like my granddaughter to do this. And I can't help but think it would be a disappointment to me. There's so much in life. But on the other hand, things are changing. And if it's a safe environment where you're not being exploited, you're self-employed, or you're earning more money than you could at a dreary job, I kind of understand it.
Well, I guess we don't think of Stormy Daniels as someone who is exploited and weak and not doing this. I mean, we might think of her as a kind of odd / potentially damaged, although she claims not. But it's you don't think of them as necessarily doing something like, I'd rather do this and be a cashier at Walmart. You can see that appeal.
Well, you have to think about, like, there are jobs where you'd be very distressed if a daughter or a son, like a race car driver. If someone I loved was, I'd be very frightened. So it's not, but somehow this seems both, you'd be frightened for their safety and you feel it's degraded. And I'm just wondering if this idea of degradation is a sort of legacy of a puritanical ethic about sex, or if there's something about selling your body or displaying your body. Well, I make a difference between prostitutes and strippers.
Right. Ones that they would see themselves as performers.
Yeah, and some of them are pretty cute and, good dancers, and, I can understand it. So let's make that distinction, where you're not actually using your body and being physically violated. Well, not violated, but
Lap dances.
lap dance. I don't know.
Well, I think what was so interesting about Alice Little and this discussion that we had of the legality of brothels, that when you make something legal and it's regulated by the state, there's a lot less opportunity for exploitation, pimps, criminality, drugs. Now, she claimed, this is one thing we didn't bring up during the podcast, I'm kicking myself. She claimed that there were no drugs at the Bunny Ranch, and not only weren't they allowed, but they never were there.
Didn't the owner just die of a drug overdose?
No, he didn't. But then, of course, I had forgotten that Lamar Odom, Khloe Kardashian's erstwhile basketball-playing husband, totally overdosed at the Bunny Ranch and went to a coma. So did he sneak them in? Did nobody know he was on drugs? Because she said that men they wouldn't let you have more than 2 drinks. If you were visibly intoxicated, you couldn't come in. So I don't know. Maybe there's, as always, different role for celebrities. Anyway, I think legalizing and can help this be at least a somewhat less exploitive, although there will be people who never believe that a woman who is a stripper is not being objectified and exploited by men innately. So,
Yeah.
all right. Next,
we have another listener on the Alice Little episode. His name is Richard.
a lot of men, interestingly, writing in on the hooker episode.
Well, Richard says, I generally enjoy your podcast, but I have to tell you that the woman from the Bunny Ranch was beyond irritating. I am not a prude, but there was something about her that was beyond the pale. I have a daughter, probably about her age. I couldn't imagine being okay with telling my peer group that she was a prostitute, and gee whiz, we're so happy for her career choice. My guess is you would say the same if you were being honest about it.
Well, I would say the same about my daughter, but that's my family. Someone else feels that way. And I'm not being a moral relativist here. I'm genuinely uncertain. I just don't know if, as I said, I don't know if it's just Puritanism that we rebel against the idea, but I rebel against the idea for myself and someone I love. And if I met her, I will just tell you a story about my late husband, who was the sweetest guy in the world, and everybody met
Fred.
you were at risk of having to go to graduate school. That's what he wanted, the young lady when he would meet. And he was once in Lebanon with a bunch of friends who were drinking. This is a long time ago. And they went to a brothel. And he didn't want to go. And I know, Fred, this is a true story. But he ends up with this girl because he didn't want to not choose somebody. And then he talks to her about her prospects and her education.
You should be in graduate school.
They wrote letters.
Well, this wasn't this what Alice Little talked about. I think I know what's bugging Richard, aside from the fact that, gee whiz, we're all thrilled that you're because this is what she said. Her family was she was close to them. She had siblings, and she'd been a jockey, and her parents had been far more upset that she'd been a jockey. And there was something about Alice. I mean, she was a poster girl spokeswoman for the Bunny Ranch. And I agree with him that it sounded just too good to be true. That we just have, she was like, and I think this is true, actually. She's genuinely sees herself and often operates as a sexual therapist. The girlfriend experience, which was the most popular and in some ways the saddest, that men would just hire, just sort of like Fred, like, I just want to hang out with you. I want to go on a date. I want to have dinner with a woman who doesn't look at her phone and who seems really interested in me. So there's a lot of that aspect to it, too. I think what Richard is saying is he just... Yeah, the Lamar Odom stories were not at all prominent in any. I mean, we could have been at Disney World by her.
By the
account.
way, yeah, it sounded a little.
So Richard, we know what you're saying. Okay, what else, Zoe?
So, Danielle, I know you actually had one that was from the election episode that piqued your interest.
Yeah, it is very long, so don't worry. I'm only going to read a small snippet of it that won't necessarily do justice. This is from another man named Jim. Do you think all of our listeners are male?
Maybe it's the same Jim.
Maybe. No, hang on. That was
Richard.
Sam and Richard. This was the episode called Think You're Angry and Have Problems. It's just before the election, and we were talking about, were women angry? Were they going to rebel? And we interviewed moderate Republican activists Kodiak and Ariel Hill Davis. But what he said, I thought, was really, really interesting in a more general way. What he took away from that episode was not so much about the politics, but he said that I should pause and remember to try and see things from a woman's point of view. He said, there have been times in my life when I've failed in my interactions with women. I know that as a younger man, I would sometimes grow impatience with the insecurities of girlfriends and later of my wife because I didn't understand them and they didn't seem important to me. I regret that now. At one point in the show, Danielle wonders what things, if we were having a genuine reckoning and reconciliation, women might acknowledge that they had done to hurt men. So I liked it that this provoked a real self-examination on his part.
Right.
On the small, we were talking about the small interactions,
right,
not the big Epstein interactions where the sexes can just hurt each other in maybe familiar, predictable ways. He says, as a man, I don't understand these insecurities. And then he talked about what women had done to hurt men. And he then in his note goes on to talk about girlfriends who kind of use you when they wanted something fixed or pretend to like you and kind of lead you on. And he wrote, I thought very movingly, about how hard it is for men to approach women and how many of them won't even dare to do it until they think that there is active interest. And then,
well, imagine, before we were talking about the shitty men in media list.
Right.
Imagine if men circulated, shitty women in the office list and told stories about, horrible, outrageous behavior from certain female bosses or female colleagues. And I'm sure that there'd be a long list. Because, as I believe, men and women are equally capable of being obnoxious and cruel and impossible. And right now, women are getting their say. But I think as Me Too and this reckoning and this renegotiating of the social contract between the sexes, I think men should be allowed to speak up because I'm sure we do a lot of things that are supremely irritating to them.
Well, one of the things we're going to talk about next episode, I'm very excited. We have Kate Julian on, who wrote this incredible article in The Atlantic about how millennials aren't having sex.
Yeah, there's a sex recession, people.
But in advance of that, I've put out over Twitter this very question. And thank you, Jim. It was inspired by your note about what are things that women do to hurt men in dating. And then women will also put it out for women as well. It's also on our Facebook.
Years ago, there was a book by Nora Vincent. I can't remember the title. Nora Vincent, just look it up. I think she's only written one book. I'm trying to find her. I love her.
Yeah.
And she dressed up, she was, I guess, a lesbian, but she dressed up like a guy and went out to see what the world was like as a man.
This is like Man Like Me, a version of the Black Like Me. Yes.
And she went out, and first of all, she looked pretty cute. I would have dated her. She was like a cute guy.
Yeah.
And just my type. And she was in the world of men. She was a bowling league, and she went to an AA men, who'd been all this sort of thing, and met guys. And then she went out to bars, and she was shocked at how mean women are.
Oh, to the men.
She said at one point, she said, women are vicious bitches. And she would go up, and she wouldn't be considered cute enough, or they didn't like her, and they were terrible. And she would watch how, women were kind of in charge, and the men had to make anyway. I mean, she's even-handed. She finds some problems with men, but not the ones you would expect. She finds that they're very in groups. Like there was a bowling league, and she was this girl, but dressed up like a guy, and a terrible bowler, and they laughed at her, but they were so friendly and helpful.
Right, men insult each other, but in a
loving way. Anyway, all that's in Nora. But if anybody knows where Nora Vincent is, I'm trying to find her because I like her.
Well, male insecurities in dating, that's definitely something we'll raise next week. And yes, please come follow us on Facebook and participate, and Twitter and Instagram, and participate in these discussions because we want to hear from you. Anyway, that's it. Happy Hanukkah.
Yes.
Let's all try not too sober. I was going to say be sober these holidays, but forget about it.
And I'm not yet persuaded by the evidence. But
all right. Thank you.